This lesson will introduce you to a new set of pronouns, the reflexive pronouns. Now remember, pronouns take the place of nouns. So in general in English they're going to be he, she, it, they, I, you, me, and so on. Now a reflexive pronoun can never be a subject, but rather it's when the subject does something to itself. So in English, we're going to use this self, right? So I love myself. Where this self is really, it's not intensifying this my, rather it's saying, this my is the direct object, and it's the same person. It's pointing to the same person in space as I. So I love myself. Or Mark or Thucydides loves himself. Or again, self says, it's the same person as the subject. So a reflexive pronoun is a pronoun that's used in an oblique case, non-nominative case, that's referring to the subject. So let's take a look at how to form these. Now the first person, what we're going to do is we're going to take a form of autos, but again in the oblique cases, in the non-nominative cases, and that's an important term to use, oblique equals non-nominative. And we're going to add the prefix m, regardless of the case. So m-autu, the genitive, m-auto, the dative, and m-auton, the accusative. And in the feminine, m-autes, m-aute, m-autain. There is no neuter, since the first person's I am going to be gendered in some way. And this is the singular. If we want to do the plural, we're going to add, it'll be a compound. We'll take the form of the first person plural pronoun, hemon, hemin, hemas, and then we'll add that form of autos in the same case. So it's essentially acting like an intensifier. So we've got, again, we've got a masculine form and a feminine form, depending on if the we is masculine or feminine. So let's take a look at some examples of how these are used. So we've got 4 sentences here. Essosa, notice all of these sentences are going to have the subject as first person. So essosa, I saved. M-auton, myself. There's accusative, because it's the direct object of the verb, but it's the same person as the verb, the same entity. Or pistuo m-auto, I trust myself. Dative, because of course pistuo takes a dative. And we use the m-auto because it's the same subject as, or the same person as the subject, I. Or in the plural, uk hemin autois makomatha. So there's our verb. We fight, or we don't fight in this case. And remember, makomai takes a dative, so there's our compound dual form, hemin autois. We don't fight ourselves. Or bazuluomen, plural, we are kings of ourselves. We rule ourselves. And the baziluo takes a genitive object. So we've got the first persons. And then the second person is very similar, but we're going to have 2 different forms. We can either add a se, to that form of autu, or we can just add a sigma right onto that. So se autu or sautu. And again, like the math, so se autu, se auto, se auton, or sautu, sauto, sauton. And we've got a masculine form and a feminine form. So very similar to the first person singular, just instead of m, we're going to add a sigma, epsilon, or just a sigma. And in the plural, we're going to use humon, right, our second person plural pronoun, plus the intensifier auton, autois, autus. Same, we've got a masculine, we've got a feminine, because presumably when we're talking about you, that's going to be a gendered person. Now some examples of these. Esosas se auton, you saved yourself. So se auton, because the subject is you, so you saved yourself. There's an accusative. Or pistues se auto, you trust yourself. Dative, because pistues takes a dative object.
or
uk hemin autois makasta. You are not fighting against yourselves. You're not fighting yourselves. Dative. And because it's plural, we've got that compound form. You are not fighting yourselves. Or basaluete, plural. So we're going to go plural reflexive if we have the reflexive. Humon auton. You are kings of yourselves. The third person, again, like the second person, we have we have two different forms. Hey how to or how to. We can either add an aspirated epsilon, or we can just aspirate the form of autos. So hey how to or how to. Hey auto, how to. Hey auton, how ton. We've got the masculine form, the feminine form, and there is actually a neuter form, and it is exactly what you would expect it to be. So it would be, the neuter would be hey how to, or how to, hey how to, and hey how to in the neuter. So you're just adding an epsilon aspirated to a form of autos. In the plural, unlike the first and second persons, we can just use the plural form of autos and add our aspirated epsilon or just our aspirate. So be careful about this. There's very little difference between a reflexive pronoun and a non-reflexive pronoun, so watch that breathing mark. Very important. And in use, esosa, esose, he auton, he saved himself, pistu usin, he autois, they trust themselves, uk autois, hautois, you caught myself there, uk hautois makontai, they don't fight themselves, or bazalue, he how to, rough breathing there, he is king of himself. So that's the reflexive pronoun. It's where the subject appears elsewhere in the sentence. That is, it's both the nominative, the same person is the nominative and the dative, or the nominative and the genitive. And in English, it's our self, himself, herself, itself, myself, yourself, and so on. Now there's one thing I want to draw your attention to, and that's the indirect reflexive. What you should know is that if the subject appears anywhere else in the sentence, it will be in the reflexive. That's even if it's a subordinate clause. So if the subject shows up anywhere, even in a subordinate clause, we're still going to use the reflexive. This is called the indirect reflexive. So let's take a look at this example here. This is from Thucydides. Perdikas is our subject. Epolomothe de hoti. So he's our subject. He was fought against. He was they made war upon him. He was warred against because, or when, the Athenians. Now this hoti says, we're in a subordinate clause. When the Athenians made allies with Philip, to heautu adelpho. There's a reflexive. Now, it's a reflexive. It's going to point back to our original subject, which is perdikas. They made allies with his brother. That is Perdikas' brother. If we didn't use the reflexive, it would be someone else's brother. But the reflexive says, it's the same subject. It's the same person as our subject. So watch those indirect reflexives. Watch the breathing marks, especially on the what looked like pronouns. If it's soft breathing, it's a pronoun. If it's a harsh breathing, it's a reflexive pronoun.